coming back to a very famous topic on this channel.
Is it?
I mean, it was relevant for like a month, I would say.
Yeah, it was relevant for like a month, and then
it was all about the flex, bro.
Yeah, and that's about all we'll say about that. Today we're going to be looking at Unknown Otaku's. I guess this is kind of like a retrospective of the drama, as well as his own theories as to why Funimation did the things that they did. Now, I've already watched the video. I kind of agree with most of it. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot that I'm going to say, so this is going to be a chill episode for me. It's very chill.
Unknown showed me a bit of the script, so I agree with most of it. Like, he got most of the points correct.
We'll get into it when we get into it, but yeah, I think
this is going to be a nice chill episode. We were not going to try and kill each other. You know, all is in harmony.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. Anyways. I haven't watched this yet, so I'm kind of going in blind.
All right, so we've got at least 2 blind watches. I know Ellie's pre-watched it a little bit before.
Yeah.
I've seen a bit of the script, so yes, for the video I'm going in blind, but I have a rough idea what's going to be brought up.
Since I keep getting interrupted, I'm trying to say that Unknown Otaku is somewhat of a friend of the channel. I think most of us know him or are in his server or talk to him regularly. So, and he's a pretty good dude. But you figured, you know what? Since the dust has settled, things have kind of calmed down. He's put out his video on the whole thing. Let's see what Unknown's take is on it. So this is the lies of interspecies reviewers. So let's get right into it. Once it decides to load, there we go.
They said you would give me Anime dub. I can't wait to see who will voice act in our Anime dub. Will voice of Goku be in it? Will you get back with the voice of Broly?
Top 10 anime portrayals.
Here's the story as we know it. Interspecies reviewers.
Okay. Okay. I'll say that that's a better intro than a Jerry Freeman video.
Can you go back a bit because my video was lagging on my end? Yeah, so I couldn't quite see it.
All right, I'll just. How's that?
They said you would give me Anime dub. I can't wait to see who will voice act in our Anime dub. Will voice of Goku be in it? Will you get back with the voice of Broly?
How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes.
Here's the story as we.
Well, no. So we did actually stop at the fucking whatever. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I thought that was an okay meme. I think that was fine. See,
I thought it was a shit post, but okay.
It was a good shit. It was a good shit post. It was See, the thing is, it was it's only 26 seconds. It's nice short intro.
Keep going. We don't need to give a commentary on the ship.
Yeah. Listen, it's well memed. He well memed. Okay, let's continue.
All right. Let's get into it.
We know it. Interspecies Reviewers was an anime that jolted up a lot of controversy by being overly lewd and sexual, without the knowledge of the companies. And because of that, they took it off the air for being their most sexual show they ever had. Some even theorized it was because of their app from the App Store, and if they showed that, Funimation may lose their privileges of putting their content on the App Store. On its face, it seems like a logical and consistent argument. Now here's why it makes no goddamn sense. And after, I'll provide an alternative explanation that jumps through even less hoops. Even if you don't agree with my reasoning, this logic still fails. The argument started from this statement by Funimation, which is neither here nor there about the why.
So we don't just go on and on.
Alright.
So I like how
I know.
I like how he goes right into the subject.
Yeah, it's very concise. I guess would be the correct word. It's very to the point. Very right. Here's the basic gist of what happened. Here's now we're going to go into sort of the facts, as it were.
it's kind of startling that we have to that this is actually a point of praise that we actually have to put out, because you think that it would be standard protocol for most channels that make how much fucking money on Patreon. I'm not calling anybody out, but they'll know. Just don't get to the point. They fucking idle for like 2, 4, sometimes 5 or 10 minutes, and then they get to the main point of it.
Yeah, because you got to drag out that runtime.
Well, you see, Lolly, that's too much work. Okay, like being direct and to the point. Like, nah, that's too much work.
No, you got to drag that runtime out.
I do want I do have the minorest issue in that he portrays as the app theory as the D theory and doesn't really explain where it comes from.
Ellie, you're roboting a little bit.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Like I can understand them for the most part.
I still understand what he said.
Nah,
yeah.
he was just
so
like
he hasn't. Yeah, so he's calling out the app theory, but he hasn't actually directly stated, at least yet, where that theory originated from. Even though it definitely, I would argue it originated from what was it, Cartoon Cypher? I think was it Cartoon Cypher? I can't remember. It was one of those channels. A pro dubs channel that made that argument, and initially I kind of agreed with that argument as well, but I also have sort of drifted away from that.
Yeah, so
certain reasons.
Just a little, he skims over it a little bit.
Yeah. So the theory behind that though was that with the App Store thing, there's multiple app stores that Funimation's little streaming thing is on. There's the Android App Store, which is run through Google Play, and then there's the iStore, which is run through Apple. Now, from my understanding, the iStore is more strict with its content. Like this has actually been a problem for some people for some like gacha games and some MOBA game, where it's at least theorized that they have had to tone down some content for the iStore to like accept it.
Yeah, good old Apple being the Puritan assholes that they are.
Oh yeah, I mean it's cover your ass material, so you know.
Pretty much. So that's the basic gist of that theory. Is that the idea is that they took interspecies reviewers down because they didn't want to have their apps scrutinized or removed.
Yeah, and I think they would.
I think Unknown is correct in that on the face of it, that sounds like a very solid theory. It's just
I would agree, because if you look at some of the other stuff that Funimation has like licenses, like they have licensed like ecchi titles and stuff like that. So like on the face of it, yeah, like maybe not putting interspecies reviewers being problematic for like the App Store. It sounds legit, but I think there's other factors that...
Well, we'll get into it, because I know it actually makes the point that I would make as my main reason why I don't agree with that theory as much anymore, but we'll let him get into it. So, let's continue.
The reasoning will have to be at play, and on the surface, this argument does hold up, but upon further inspection, it falls flat on the floor. Interspecies Reviewers is the most lewd show they've ever had, subbed or dubbed. And it shows sexually explicit material that could get it removed from the App Store, which is a factually true statement, and this would completely hold up A-OK if we were talking about the uncensored version. The problem is here, we aren't talking about the uncensored version.
Well,
we are talking about the censored.
I kind of disagree, because even tamer stuff before in the App Store got got censored down from its...
I can get that. The issue with that, though, Ellie, is we've got the pre-existing example of all the other shows that Funimation has that are censored or somewhat censored. Okay, so here's the thing. It's true that Interspecies Reviewers is more sexually explicit than those other shows uncensored, right?
Mm-hmm.
The issue is, when we look at the totality of Funimation's catalogue, including the censored versions for the ecchi shows that are already on there, I would argue that censored interspecies reviews is probably on par.
Well,
in terms of visual content, you have to think of the context within this, because there's been a lot of how would I say this? Especially, at least in the U.S., there's been a lot of controversy involving things like sex work and stuff like that, which Interspecies Reviewers is primarily about. It's a fantasy version of it,
So
it'd be stupid to like get offended or anything by it. But at the same time, if you're trying to if you're already kind of skirting the line and you're trying to avoid the ire of, let's
moral
say,
busybodies.
Yeah.
whatever, yeah.
yeah, it would probably make sense that after a few episodes, you're looking at that, you're kind of like, somebody in the upper management is going to be like, this might actually fuck with relations or something.
No,
So
I get
even if it's the content, how many harem shows have a character undressed in some state?
I wouldn't.
more
I
or,
wouldn't.
more or less than what happens in this show.
Okay,
but the
I wouldn't
context
for,
of
for a
this-
start, I'm not talking about like random harem show that just so happens to have like fucking boobs in it. I'm talking about the actual itchy catalog of Funimation,
Yeah,
which
I mean,
includes
in-
include I'm just saying that to be fair, right? Because let's be fair, Funimation does have stuff like Valkyrie Drive Bikini or whatever.
High
it's
School
called.
DxD.
High School DxD, Quasar, right?
Yeah,
like,
I
let's be at least fair in that regard, that it's not just there's a
Well,
naked
with-
girl in the bathroom in the harem show. There is
One thing-
actual itchy.
One thing I would have to ask though is how many of those are currently streaming on their app store.
Well, I know they're selling them on DVD and Blu-ray.
Quasar came out years ago before. Quasar came out during the time and was licensed by
Now-
Funimation way before the boom. And
Now you see, that's actually a really valid question that should be asked and looked into. Because
And-
I would know, because I can't fucking see Funimation streaming catalog.
yeah,
I wonder why.
with High School DxD and what was the other one you said?
Valkyrie Drive.
Valkyrie Drive Bikini. Valkyrie Drive is probably the most recent one.
Yeah, I'd have to one see if those are actually streaming on the App Store, and two, it's kind of a context thing. Again, you have the context of they are actually reviewing prostitutes within the show. Like, what's
Right.
That's kind
Okay.
of different from the from what would be like the accidental perversion type of ecchi, or
Or the more deliberate type. Yeah. No. I think that's valid. I think that's a valid thing. We'll see how our unknown kind of, goes into that. But yeah, no, I think that's valid. I think that's perfectly valid. So yeah, let's keep going.
Version, which changes most of the statement into being false. The most sexually explicit would be a bit debatable, as there are other animes that are indeed censored, but could be seen as more explicit, as it actually shows more. And then we get into the art.
Okay, one thing I will critique unknown here on this one is I would have liked some examples of those shows. As you mentioned, Lolly, we don't know whether or not some shows like Quasar and all that are streaming on Funimation. So it would have been good if he kind of named names there and was like, okay, so here's an example of Quasar or whatever that's on Funimation streaming site that has, all of this content in it that's somewhat more explicit in a sense, right? That would have strengthened his argument quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, and just for the context bit, I don't think it really matters if another show is more explicit visually. It's one thing to have a book detailing the various functions and placements of organs around the genitalia, and having a porn. One
Yeah, I
may
think the
one
I think
is
the context
may-
argument. Hang on, sorry.
Yeah, so one is, you can have some sexy cover-ups, and it's more explicit. It's a less explicit than a full nude.
Sexy Anatomies Weekly.
Yeah, you can have an anatomy
Our
book
hearts
that
are
is
throbbing.
more. You can have an anatomy book that's more explicit. It reveals more, but is less sexual. So I don't think
Right, so
explicit itself
I think
means a lot.
I was going to say the context argument is actually very interesting, and I don't think was kind of brought up a lot, both at the time and I think now. That I think is actually quite a valid sort of point as to why, because of the context. However, the issue also, at the end of the day, it's Funimation, so
Are we pulling you
it's
back?
hard. No, you're not pulling me back. It's more that I do think that that's a valid sort of point, right? I think that because here's the thing, my stance is that yes, I agree with a lot of what Unknown's saying, but I have my own reasons.
Yeah.
I think that I have my own kind of like theories, I guess, and I think that part of the issue is that at the end of the day, Funimation never really gave us any fucking actual indication of why. They just said, "Oh, it's doesn't meet our standards," and that doesn't fucking actually tell you
Oh,
anything.
you're spoiling the video.
I know. That's because you keep fucking putting me into positions where it's hard for me not to, right? You're asking me these questions, and it's like, oh, I'm trying not to spoil.
Just listen, Ellie. When you're editing the video, just put a spoiler warning. Like, just have like spoiler warning flash up on the screen.
Anyway, let's keep going.
Argument of what is considered more sexually explicit: text, audio, and fully censored for the lewd parts, or text, audio, and partially censored. While if it was this black and white, it wouldn't be a debate, but the reasoning it is debatable now would be on how far the text and audio goes. Which a lot of harems text and audio does go as far as interspecies reviewers, but not for as long. Although the audio was never a problem before, and how far they went was never a problem before for the App Store. Thus, I don't think it would start being a problem now, although it doesn't stop here.
Yeah, see, so that's kind of... So again, I get the context argument, but I also kind of agree with Unknown, where it's sort of a case of, okay, well, it wasn't a problem, but like the actual content being presented wasn't a problem before, but now it suddenly is. Now, the context can possibly be the defining factor, and I think Unknown probably should have brought that up as part of it.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, but I don't know. You know, I don't know. It's, you know, kind of being a bit centrist on this one.
Alright. So I'm going to be then, I don't know, center whatever direction on this, and say that the description and the context, I think, really do matter. And if you have a show that is about high school boy gets into finds out he's sports hero, demon, whatever, and has some hot the demoness living with him and some hot schoolgirl girlfriend, and they go on adventures and defeat evil with some sexy time in between. It's very different from guy and gang goes and reviews whores.
I would have to agree with Ellie on this one. Like, there seems to be like a different level of it. You know, like one's like, oh, happy-go-lucky adventure. Oh, will they fuck? Maybe. Oh, will he touch something? And then this one's like, brothel review.
Right.
Smash.
Okay. Smash. Right. No, I get you. No, I think that's fine. I think a valid criticism of the video itself, I guess, is that it doesn't, so far at least, bring up that context. I think that
Yeah,
would have been a good
and
thing. It would have been a good thing to kind of address, because I do think that it is a very valid counter to the idea of, yes, the actual physical stuff being shown on stream is not is on par explicit wise, if we're talking about censored version, obviously, right? Is on par censored wise. The context is different.
And if we are going back to the boardroom with the people who don't know anything about what they're selling or whatever, one description about high school boy finds out he has magical superpowers, gets a semi-harem, gets into some
Also,
new situation, and if you see another show with the description, they go to brothels and fuck prostitutes.
Yeah, like, because if you read the interspecies reviewer synopsis, I'm pretty sure it says that right off the gate. Like,
Yeah,
they're reviewing Monster Girls
so
and
that
fucking
goes
them.
that. See, I don't want to fucking spoil shit. I'm gonna get into my actual final stance on this will be spoiled if I drop it now, right? Like I can't. I'm trying.
Yeah.
Then play the video.
trying-
No,
God,
I-
Elliot's pause on point, not pause and then make all your points.
Yeah, no, but a point that I'm
Elliot,
going
blowing his
before we
wad early?
continue, a point I am going to make is I'm going to go unknown subtitles from the anime on the screen. Bad boy. I've got the newspaper. Lolly, have you got your newspaper ready? We're gonna have to beat the dog for peeing on the carpet.
I have something, but I don't think it counts as a newspaper, but sure.
just bad boy, bad. No don't use subtitle versions in your footage. It's bad boy. Bad.
Unless the characters are speaking and you need a translation.
Yeah, there's no reason to have subtitles right now. But anyway, let's keep going.
A few more arguments people proposed is this. If they were going to keep censoring it, they would have censored the entire screen, so they couldn't even do it. No, they were already doing this. There was no problem with censoring an entire screen. Anime has done this in the past, anime have done this now, this anime currently did it, and anime will keep doing it in the future. As for it would just be 20 minutes of a black screen. No. Anyone that makes this argument clearly hasn't seen the show.
Yeah.
It's literally about 1 minute in most episodes, at most. In fact, all the other times is dedicated to either world building or learning about the Monster Girls, which is also world building, or as the anime calls them, sucky girls, because they're all part succubus. So yeah, anime current.
Actually, I don't think they're all actually part succubus. I think
I think he
isn't
was
the joke.
making the joke.
I think
he was
I
making a joke.
I think he was making a joke as well, but at the same time, I think that the actual is it the law supposed to be that they instituted laws to allow succubus to be able to do their thing, but then every other species just decided to call themselves a succubus so that they could fucking
Well,
do it as well.
the show, the first episode establishes that they are all descendants of imparts, even if it's diluted by
okay.
1/100th or whatever.
So they are all just okay. Yeah, because
they all
like,
need some
it's
semen
like
consumption.
you have to remember that this has been a while, so
If I
I'm possibly misremembering.
No, if I remember correctly, this wasn't the case in the manga. They basically say, in the anime, they said, they are all, every girl, I would imagine every living being on that planet, in the world, is, by extension, 1/80th parts succubus at some point.
All right, so he's not. So this is about to move on. The basic gist is he's not actually wrong, and that's fine.
No, he's not wrong.
'Cause I was just questioning. I was
Unknown
questioning his
is
lore knowledge.
correct.
He is correct. All right, let's keep going.
Does this, and anime will keep doing this. Unless something drastically changes about how we distribute anime. That is an assumption. Yes, that is an assumption. Just like the App
1,
Store taking
2.
it down is an assumption.
3.
1, 2, 3, 4. How many assumptions are in my stock?
Now, I watched this part, and he's going to say assumptions a lot.
All right, well let's get.
Should we start? Should I crack out the vodka and start drinking game?
Well, let's just watch it and then we can critique it after we've seen it.
And when you take a step on land, you're assuming you're not going to fall through the earth. All of these are assumptions, but not all assumptions are created equal. The idea of assuming makes an ass out of you and me is in reference to illogical assumptions without any data backing it up, or something didn't go the way you wanted. And that last one's still a little iffy if it fits. There are stuff called reasonable assumptions, such as if no tampering was done on a 1-year-old train and there's nothing on the train tracks, while it has been perfectly maintained, it won't jump off the tracks to hit you. To assume otherwise is just asinine. Assumptions are just part of human life, and if you have data to back it up, it is more logical to assume that it will go that way. Okay, maybe a real-life example now, such as someone saying Mal will fix their score for interspecies reviewers because they have done it for multiple anime in the past, and the other person says, that is an assumption. Yes. That is an assumption, and the logical one. The only other
So
option to
many.
Yeah, a little off. I think we're getting a little off point here.
Yeah.
Let him finish his analogy so we can actually talk about, the two assumptions
Okay.
being made here.
Alright, let's go.
Mal will change it is Mal will not change it, which doesn't fall in line with reality, as well as the person that said Mal will change it was correct. One could say I'm a little bit of a determinist, not exactly, as I believe if you put people in a predictable environment, the average person in that environment will keep producing the average results, and keep contributing to statistics. As the universe is made up of a near infinite amount of formulas, but if you can figure it all out, you should be able to do a 100% prediction 100%
This
of
is
the
what
time.
happens
It's
when you hang out with Rika Fag.
Alright, I'm gonna
Yeah,
stop
your
it.
brain
he
fucking
he might have
explodes.
more. He might have more, but we kind of have to find a point to stop it. So, right, let's go. Let's dissect
Alright,
that then, shall we?
15 times he said the word assumption. And he could have
Okay.
done it with like 3 times.
He could have pulled out. He could have pulled out a thesaurus.
Alright,
Or the Oxford Dictionary.
All right, let's let Lolly go. Lolly, wants to
So,
go.
Ellie, bringing this back to why he's making this, I guess, this analogy to kind of prove his point. He's talking about that it's an assumption to say that, there's some sort of motive outside of the App Store thing behind why they would remove it, and also it's an equal assumption for the App Store excuse being valid, right? One of the things he says is that I'm guessing he's trying to say that both are equal, but I honestly do think that the App Store assumption is at least a little bit more valid, because we do have outside data in regards to other apps and the own terms of service policies on these stores that act as valid data, right?
Yeah, we do indeed.
Whereas with
I think-
political motivation, we don't even know who's calling the shots, right? Because I'm going to
Well,
assume
it
that
could
that's
be-
where this is going.
It could
right?
be anyone.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
No, I'm sorry, Naretsu, maybe you can help me with this. Where did he ever connect this assumption point to the rest of the video? Because it's...
I don't recall. See, my thing with this bit is what he's doing is he's trying to cut off the obvious he's trying to cut off a criticism before it happens, in a sense, where people are going to be going, oh, you're just making assumptions, you're just assuming this or whatever. So I can kind of get where he's coming from, but at the same time,
He's
what
like
are
thinking
what
like
we have
3
to look
steps
at?
ahead.
Hang on. We have to look at what are the current assumptions that have been made, right? The current assumption that has been made is that the App Store reason is not correct because of the content not being as, in his view, not being as explicit as other things, right? That are available. Again, he should have provided examples for that were actually examples and not just talk about it. And then he's like, the thing that kind of triggered this was talking about sort of the censorship kind of stuff, if I recall correctly. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this wasn't particularly necessary, and I don't think he needed to spend as much time on it. I think he could have cut this in half in terms of runtime, and it probably would have, like Ali said, right? He could have probably gotten away with only saying the word assumptions 3 times, right? Right? In a sense.
I mean, he says it so much, I could probably make a drinking game out of it.
Yeah, I feel like that you didn't need to kind of cut this criticism off at the pass so hard, I feel. Because people just going, oh, you're making an assumption. Like, that's not fucking relevant anyway. Like, so what? Everyone's making assumptions.
Well, I figure
everyone's making assumptions anyway, because at the end of the day, we don't have any definitive answer. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Well, now that could have been the shorter way to say it.
Yeah.
Just be like, you might think I'm making assumptions, but assumptions are all we can genuinely make because we weren't ever given a clear answer.
And I think I have my reasons that elevate it above just assumptions.
Yeah.
And these are the things that would make me believe that and go on from there.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been a much better way to go about that.
Yeah, well, because basically what he's doing is basically like thinking 5 steps ahead. Because basically, from what I've seen so far of the video and the script, like he's making an argument, but he's also making an argument for the future arguments that will happen in his comment section.
So the issue with doing that, because that's actually not a thing exclusive to Unknown here. That's something that a lot of people sometimes tend to do, is they will try to cut off that kind of criticism, and because they can see that criticism happening, so they try to cut it off in the past. You have to be very careful when you do that.
Yes.
Because if you do that, and again, if you assume that people are going to make that criticism of you, right, and you try to cut it off at the pass, you might Streisand affect it and end up causing more people to have that criticism once you bring it up, right? That wouldn't have otherwise thought about. I don't necessarily think that a lot of people would have looked at this video and gone, "Oh, you're just making assumptions." And if they did, then the easy counter would have just been to say, "Yeah, well, you're making assumptions too." Right?
Or, I have my reasons, can you name yours?
Yeah, I have my reasons and I have my evidence. What's your evidence, right? So I think that this section of the video is kind of weak, I feel.
I think it's a bit too long. Like he could I understand what he's doing, but I don't think it was necessary.
I get what he's doing. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary. But yeah, let's keep going.
It's a matter of finding those formulas. Although I'm not gonna lie, I knew Mal has been working on its voting system for a long time now. Not just because of their announcement that they have been working on it, but there was other fishy things that happened many months ago that may get a video of its own. The next argument. TV services took it off as well. Why are you not tirading against them? This is where I get into why it's a completely different situation. I could say TV scheduling works completely different than on-demand streaming, thus these aren't even comparable, but there are some that won't accept that.
It's not acceptable to call me a...
So here's why they're completely fucking different. There were multiple TV stations that were airing it, and the ones that took it off were, you guessed it, the censored versions. But wait, doesn't that mean they would have taken it off for being too sexual, as well as proving the original point?
Absolutely fucking not.
As a generalization, companies and corporations exist to turn a profit, unless proven otherwise. When there is censored versus less censored or uncensored, people will go to the uncensored...
real quick? Just a general point. That previous segment kind of poisons the rest of the video. Because that poor part is so defensive that the jokes afterwards kind of feel more desperate.
Yeah, I have a question as well, because so the Japanese TV channels that took that down. A question I want to ask is what was the time? What time was these shows was Interspecies Reviewers airing?
Yeah, so I think he's going to get into that a little bit, right? Because he did sort of briefly bring up the time slot, the differences.
Yeah, that's right.
Because here's the thing, he's not actually kind of wrong here, right? It is very different talking about like a TV station versus a on-demand streaming service, right?
Yeah.
The streaming service doesn't have the same level, in general, it doesn't have the same level of restriction, and also doesn't have the restriction of needing to have time slots that shows are technically fighting for, right? Shows are fighting for those time slots because some time slots are more valuable in terms of real estate than others, especially in terms of advertising as well. So,
because if I remember hearing somewhere that shows that are a bit raunchy in subject matter, not full on hentai, but halfway there. Usually they get, the late night time slots.
Well, you see, the thing with Japan is they have a channel that's specifically dedicated for that kind of thing, right? So I think it's ATX. They have ATX, which still aired Interspecies Reviewers after it was taken down from the other channels, right? Because that's the key thing here, which Unknown's kind of getting into now, but I'll just kind of, might as well. It was the censored version was taken off the channels that were not necessarily the adult channels. It was they were just normal stations, technically, right?
And I think that's understandable.
And from what I understand, I'm going to use that word, right? my assumption, right, is that they would have taken it down less so because of the content and more so because of the time slot and viewership numbers. Because what's probably happening is, okay, the viewership numbers on the censored version in this time slot are not that high in comparison to the uncensored version on this channel, where it's relatively high. There's probably another show that we could put in this time slot that would get more people to watch at this particular time and could probably make use of that time slot more. Let's just swap them around, right? That's seems a lot more logical and a lot more, justifiable to me than, oh no, they took it out because of the it's too raunchy at the time, right?
Yeah, especially considering that, first of all, there was 2 TV stations that pulled broadcasting.
I think it was 2. It could have been 3, but I
Yeah.
think at
I mean, do you want me to look it up?
I think at the least it was 2.
Yeah, now, okay, not sure if you're aware of how large Japan is as a country. A lot of people just assume it's really small, so clearly they only must have 1 or 2 TV stations. No, there's quite a few TV stations. There was TV, what was it? It was TV Tokyo that...
TV Tokyo.
It was
cut their
TV Tokyo and MMT. What was this? It showed up on the screen for a second. It
Yeah,
was
but there were
MTX.
still airings otherwhere. I know that Osaka had its own broadcast version on public television. So I wouldn't buy the it was too raunchy for public TV thing either, because it seems more like a logistics issue than anything.
Yeah, because Japan they have a lot of local stations, I believe. The way that they handle.
Yeah, if
television.
I remember hearing that, this is a kind of bit off topic, but I've actually heard that they have separate detergents for each of the different provinces. So, I don't think it's out of the question that they'll have local detergents. They have a separate detergent for each fucking province of Japan.
That is very certainly off topic, but
The reason why I bring it up is because it does I don't think it's I'm going to use the word again. It's fair to assume that they probably have local broadcasting or other local, media outlets.
One of the stations is called TV Tokyo. I think that might be a local. Might just be.
Maybe, just maybe. Yeah, because So, as it stands, getting back to the video, I think this is a pretty valid point about the TV stations. I think people using the fact that it was taken down from Japanese TV as a justification for Funimation is false. I don't think that that's accurate at all, and it's certainly not comparable in terms of the situation. But let's see how Noah continues his point.
Their version with rare exceptions. Examples like Shimoneta. It would be in their best interest to, instead of the censored one competing with the others, to just switch to a different anime, and to not even have to fight a losing battle. But if companies are acting in what will drive them the most money, wouldn't they just air the uncensored version? In a perfect world, yes, but some channels like to brand themselves with different levels of what is acceptable and what isn't, mostly due to advertisers. That's just capitalism.
I do like Unknown's sense of humor. I'll give him that. And the fact that his little jokes, right? His little kind of visual gags and jokes that he puts into this video they don't outstay their welcome, and they're not intrusive to the video. I would compare it to Jerry Freeman, right? Where Jerry Freeman's kind of very fast. I'm going to flash shit on the screen really quickly so you can't read it, and I'm going to be very aggressive and da-da-da-da. This is more articulate, deliberate. I'm making the joke.
Yeah, no one has very good timing.
Yeah, I'm making the joke, but I'm not staying on it for too long, and it's just kind of there. I'm not drawing attention to it. It's just kind of, oh look, there's the big basement man's face while I'm talking about channels that market themselves, that kind of thing, right? So I guess that's just a positive I sort of wanted to compliment him with.
But I'm still a little bit, not anymore of course, because it's been way too long since, but again, that big segment where he says, I'm not assuming things, you are assuming things. Now, next joke is about how you are wrong to think that.
Okay, so some of that, I
Yeah,
get
so-
that, but
so
I'm
that- that hangs around.
Ellie,
so I
stop
would,
time traveling. I haven't seen that yet.
yeah.
no, that's
Alien, back to the video.
Okay.
was in the back section.
Alright, well, let's keep going.
In Economics 101. Now, how is this different for streaming? There's no time slots that they're fighting for, and they have the license to stream it. If they have it to stream so that people can watch it, they can do so. Although without them hosting the uncensored version, they would have to go to piracy for that.
Do what you want, cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate.
Or wait until the Blu-rays. There is no economic argument for them to take it down, and they still make money from people watching it. As for the, yeah, but they still removed it. Yes, but there's plenty of other places that have it. No exclusivity. And you know, it isn't like they're the only legal streaming source and then refuse to stream it, forcing the only way people want to watch it being piracy.
Well,
You can say it was
can you
bad,
pause real
but
quick? Because there is, of course, an economic argument for removing interspecies reviewers if it will harm you in a way.
If it would harm you in a PR and a get your ass fucking taken down sense.
Yeah, so
It's actually funny because them taking it down did do that. So
yeah, it's interesting because
It was a bad move. I think we can all agree that it was
Yeah,
a
different
shitty move on their
PR.
part.
more
Yeah, it was-
busybody PR versus Angry Nerds PR.
I think I can I get where you're coming from, Ellie. With there is certainly like the economic argument of will this hurt us from the perspective of the outrage machine is going to come after us or whatever, and also regulatory bodies are going to come after us or whatever for it, which would cause more
Future business
costs.
contracts.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like perhaps that statement was a little bit incorrect. Other than that statement, I think his argument in this section is fine. It's just, yeah, I do think that.
I think it's less that the statement is flawed and more that it's not looking at another potential angle. At least not yet. Again, only 7 minutes into the video, and some of you have time traveled.
Yeah, Ellie. I'm trying not to do that. But, yeah, let's keep going.
it was just an economical move, which is to be expected of most companies. Not to mention Funimation, if that was really the case, could just not put it up on their App Store or block it from appearing on the App Store, and just have everything else. And instead, say on the App Store, this show is...
Now, see, that is valid. Is something they could have done in hindsight, which would have probably been much better, would just say, hey, it's not available on the app, but we'll keep it on the site, and we'll keep doing it on the site. And
Yeah.
we're gonna still release it as a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever, and we're still gonna dub it, and we're still gonna actually like put it out. It's just that it's not going to be on the app stores, and I actually think that is the single argument that just completely destroys the whole app store thing. However, it ties into something that's going to come up later. So I'm gonna wait on that.
Just to
Oh god, no.
give
Okay,
a little.
so
So go ahead first, Louis.
so the fact that they might not have had a separate app store and then a separate website version it kind of implies that their website version is just a mobile version just slapped into a web browser, which fuck me.
Well, you see, the thing with it is I wouldn't know because I can't use Funimation in my country. So it's kind of like,
Just get a VPN.
I know, alright? It's like, I have to jump through all these hoops just to watch my anime.
Yeah, like they do the streaming to make getting access to anime easier, but we in New Zealand, we have to get VPNs, we have to like hack into Funimation just to watch the episode.
Well, to be fair, Interspecies Reviewers was on Anime Lab, as I know and brought out. So to be fair, we did have an avenue. So I'm not gonna.
It would be pretty Chad just if, as a streaming service, you also did a collaboration with like a VPN.
Yeah.
NordVPN.
That would be fucking.
Yeah. So
Well, not Nord.
So if I can kick back just a little bit and say, if the App Store alone, if you have a show which you can't put on the App Store, then it's too bad. So it's so bad you can't put it on the App Store, which is a pretty high. It is not a very high bar, but it is a bar that needs to pass.
It is a logical a bar that does exist that is logical to hit.
So and of course we don't know the exact reasons, and one of them is of course it harms future business, PR, something fake company harm, and that wouldn't necessarily be mitigated by keeping it off the app, even if you could.
The issue is we have to think about how much, would it actually harm them to have, because again, I feel like that is something to consider, but I think it's a bit shaky to think that having interspecies reviewers specifically would cause that much harm in terms of that. I actually think it's probably caused more harm on the, if we're talking about the business partners as being the production committees and the Japanese side of things, I think it's possibly caused more harm to cut that off, to say, oh shit, we fucked up, right? Because I think that's possibly caused more harm for that side than anything else. But of course, we don't know. Of course, we don't know what Funimation is thinking in terms of what partners they want to take, and that kind of what other business opportunities they're looking to gain and that type of thing.
Yeah, it's mostly the one way or another they saw interspecies reviewers as a risk of some kind, and we don't know which one it is, from which direction, and from high or low or whatever. I don't want to exclude business, just good old business, future business contracts as an option.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm trying to exclude it. I just think it's probably low on the list. I think it's very low on the list. I'm failing to see what business opportunities they could possibly lose out on by having interspecies reviewers. That's kind of my hung up.
I actually have a bit of insight to this, because I am in contact with various people who run light novel publishers and who do dealings with people in Japan, and I've heard people stories of people going back on promises and stuff like that, and it just it closed a lot of doors or made Japanese companies less willing to work with them.
Right.
So I can't name the companies because this was in private. I'm not going to do that, but this is information I've heard from very reliable sources, people in the know. So
yeah, I feel like that's what I mean by I think that this move has possibly harmed them more in that business respect, and they probably were trying to avoid. Again, it's kind of like the Streisand effect, where it's in trying to mitigate the disaster.
Looking at this a bit more holistically, Funimation is very closely tied to Sony, as they're directly owned by it, and Sony does own Aniplex, and they have investments over there. So I think for Funimation to pull this probably harms them less than you think it does, because they already are attached to something that is an entity that is large enough that they're kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say immune, but they're able to absorb and smooth things out a bit more, right? Imagine if you're trying to do imagine you're trying to do international business, and there's one port in town that's going to sail out and deliver your goods, right? Now there's a little kerfuffle in the contract with that port, and they either seize or they completely just they fuck it up somehow, right?
It's
because it's the only port. And because of how large it is, you'd have to probably go through another city's port or something in order to get the same business. I can hear myself in the background. Oh, whatever. Because of that, they're less ignorable. Like, you can't just ignore.
Yeah, I
them as-
understand. Like, because the companies that I'm talking about are a lot more smaller in scale, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So,
Which
however,
kills me.
however-
People talk about Funimation like it's a small company. No, it is attached to Sony.
yeah, but I was gonna bring up that works both ways. That works both ways in that. Okay, so it means that the damages from them removing it are probably mitigated, but it also means the damages that they would have had for keeping it are possibly also very marginal, right? In a sense. So I feel like that actually is kind of a double-edged sword in this case, because yes, they're tied to Sony and that's a big company, but that also shields them as well.
Yeah.
From a lot of that stuff. So it kind of works in both directions. But let's keep going. We've got about almost 10 minutes left, so let's go.
Isn't available in the app, go to the website to watch it, and then have a website link or something, rather than just canceling the entire show and then having the license and not streaming it anywhere. This addresses the vast majority of the questions. If there's another one that I see often, I'll put an answer to it in the pinned comments. Now, what do I really think happened? I can't say for sure, but you can say I have an assumption, yes, but one backed up with historical precedents. But if you want, you can take that with a grain of salt. I will give my conclusions first, and then back it up with examples. There was a small vocal voice about episode 3.
Because he could have just said that and not have that entire first segment explaining
that's
what
true.
an assumption is.
Yeah, I think,
Actually, Ellie, when we're doing the video, can you make like an assumption counter, like just
Maybe.
counting?
Well, it's
Maybe.
16 or 17.
Alright, but anyway, we've already kind of gone over that at great length, so let's see what his actual conclusion is.
But not about his hypersexualization, but rather about the theme that was presented. About a person taking a potion, HRT, to look like a female, or male prospectively, having sex with them, or marrying them, only to find out later that they were actually the other sex, and for them to flip out or cause havoc. What does this sound like? Oh, yeah, that's right. Trans panic defense.
It is man.
Let's remember, Funimation says it falls out of their standard.
I don't
So this
like...
was...
sorry, I want just one complaint first before we go into more substance, and that is that he didn't really explain what happened in the episode.
Yes.
I also have that problem as well.
Alright, hang on. I think that he did convey the general gist of the Pacific scene, right? Because it was a very small Pacific scene that talked about why they can't leave that particular brothel after they've taken the potion, and the reason given was basically that they don't want you to go out and have a one-night stand with some dude and then wake up the next day and it turns out you're that kind of thing. That I think that he kind of conveyed the general idea. Could he have gone a bit more in depth with explaining what the synopsis of what happened in the episode? Maybe. I think that here's the thing: if he'd taken the time that he had spent on that whole assumption bit and spent that on the synopsis of episode 3, yeah, that would have been good. That's fine. But for me personally, I think that he did that was fine. I don't think could have been better. But
I feel it was kind of the actual synopsis was hidden away in all the replacement words, and therefore it's a little bit unclear what the actual episode did and what the controversy next to it was.
What the theorized controversy was, because I honestly haven't heard that argument before. I wish I had a webcam on me, because the moment he mentioned the whole thing with the trans panic defense, my eyebrow physically raised.
So with episode 3, there was a very, very small amount of people, probably only like 1 or 2 people, that had a problem with that episode. I remember there was at least one Twitter feminist or whatever that had made like a thread about interspecies reviewers, and then had completely like 180 their opinion on it based on episode 3 and going, oh no, this show's fucking horrible, blah 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 blah, because of this bloody trans panic shit, right? And so there was probably like a somewhat of a sentiment among a very, very minority amount of crazy people that had a problem with it. But it certainly didn't blow up, right? I don't think that it blew up in a massive sense that there was a controversy about it. It was just like the murmurings of like a few select individuals.
Because if I can give my own thoughts on when I saw that part of the episode, and I forget the exact wording and what said, etc. But what I took from it was, we don't want you to get out, because now you're basically another person with a perfect disguise, and we don't want people with perfect disguises go out. And they framed it in a sexual way.
Yeah, they used the example of marrying someone or whatever. I think that the issue is that, yeah, you could probably logically correlate that to trans panic defense, but I really don't think that was the intent, and I also really don't think that a lot of the
we
time...
are making like the death of the author argument right now.
Okay, yeah, because I don't think it's the intent. It also, I'm getting tired of death of the author. Fuck that shit. I feel like, one, it wasn't the intent, and two, I think that a lot of people, particularly in that community, like to insert themselves into shit when it's maybe not necessarily valid. I don't think that particular scene was specifically talking about trans people. I think that, yes, they changed genders, yes, it was talking about a very similar scenario, but I don't think that it was actually deliberately referencing that. Maybe indirectly, but not specifically. And I think that if there was a controversy about it, which I don't think there was, there really wasn't. It was very murmury, right? If there was a controversy about it, I think that it would have just been a lot of people inserting their own views onto what was actually being shown rather than the actuals. Like,
to the best of my knowledge, the trans panic defense is a very, very American thing.
It's a very American thing, and it's also... I don't even think it's a thing anymore. I don't even think it's...
Though I still occasionally hear you can't treat trans women as different from women when you're trying to when you're approaching them for relationships or whatever.
That's different.
Okay, well, hang on a second. I'm talking about the legal aspect of it.
Oh, the legal.
Yeah,
aspect
like we're talking about that. We're talking about that episode where that one, we're talking about the thing where that guy found out that the chick that he was dating was an actual dude.
We talked about. Oh man, this is gonna be a throwback. Way long time ago when we were talking about traps, right? We talked about the trans panic defense then, right? And how it's a thing, right? Or it was a thing. I don't know if it's still legal. I don't think it's legal in a lot of places, to be honest, like in terms of like being a valid defense. However, I think that if you're actually fucking trying to fucking deceive people for sex,
that's what you're talking about in particular. Yeah. I don't think that would hold up in a modern court, because that's...
Yeah, I don't think it would either.
I mean, I guess it would depend on the court. Here's the thing. U.S. is fucking huge, and different local smaller courts might have different standards because they're all stocked by different judges who might have different values on things, right? So I could see maybe some Bible Belt courts, those districts.
Yeah, I mean...
maybe some, yeah.
But the moment you brought that up to a higher court, like an appeals or something, I guarantee you any judgment that would use that as a justifiable defense would be
fucked.
Yeah, because that I wouldn't consider waking up, like, even if it wasn't necessarily consensual, I wouldn't see waking up next to a trans person and then freaking out and killing them as any form of justifiable defense.
I
Yeah.
agree.
We all have some
like,
weird.
that-
we
that-
all
that's
have
like-
heard some weird example of something that happened in a court in another country, but I think it's time to move on.
Yeah, but I guess the general gist of like to bring it back to interspecies reviewers is I don't think interspecies reviewers was talking about that at all, and I think that the example that they used in that particular instance makes sense for what they're talking about, and I think that if there were people that had a problem with it, then
Yeah, it was,
So that's-
it was less, oh, this is justifying this, and more, hey, don't go out and, trick people with this. We don't want
hey, don't be an idiot. Right? This is basically
Actually,
like
I actually think actually going off the community aspect that you mentioned before, I'm pretty sure majority of the people that live in this town or something they know each other. So
well, it's kind of like I know we want to move on, and I do want to move on. It's just that yeah, let's just move on because there's not really a whole lot more to say about this. I think that the whole idea that the show was referencing the whole trans panic stuff is completely false, and I think that it's just nonsense. But let's continue.
Now let's remove the fact that Funimation is decently left-wing, because even left-wing or right-wing people can make the opposite political position, but instead let's look at the past actions to judge this. So, everyone knows about the big three. No, not those big three.
Choo-choo-doo. Freezing.
Oh boy.
You. Achoo.
Aha! Dragon Maid, Prison School, and Hajime no Gao. I won't bore you with the details, as these three have been talked to death already, and is only part of the examples that I'm bringing up. I have more later. The thing I want to look into is specifically what the people who changed the dub actually said about why they did it, while confusion with sexuality is at odds with timeline/dub culture. It is
Alright,
quite
can
an
I
eye-opener.
quick pause?
It could be
Because, to be very honest, I kind of skipped over it because the argument was very clear from the very beginning. So I wanted to go more to the end. But I'm missing a step between these people like to insert more lefty things in their dubs with this is the reason why there was a company decision to have interspecies reviewers removed.
Yeah, because a wholesale decision to just completely remove something seems to be more of an upper management thing, where
Yeah.
something like changes within the script and subtitling or within the dub would be something that is more to the ADR department, probably just
So,
given a lot more leeway.
This was talked about a lot at the time because I remember the very first the first thing people jumped to was this, right? The first thing people jumped to was, oh, Funimation's doing their social justice lefty bullshit again. And I initially did jump on that, but at the same time, I kind of thought no, because, like you said, this is not a decision that would have been made at the lower levels. There's no way that, Monica Rial or whatever has the power to get the entire company to drop a show, right? And if she does have that kind of power, that's fucked. That's bad.
Yeah, that is
From
frightening.
What I heard or what I saw in some threads that were talking about, there was a Reddit thread, and one of the voice actresses actually came in for the English dub, and apparently they they had learned about it being canceled kind of suddenly as well.
Yeah, so
And
that
genuinely
leads...
had fun, or at least in their words, genuinely had fun dubbing the show.
Yeah, so that leads a lot more into the idea that this was definitely a higher up, it was a much higher made decision than just...
Something tells me that the higher ups at Funimation probably aren't nearly as left leaning as you think.
Yeah, something tells me that as well. But let's keep going. Get through this section.
Be a big topic for later down the line, as that is a huge can of worms that I'm not going to open just yet. Let's turn our attentions to didn't want the implications that Miss K finds something wrong about lesbianism. She doesn't, just not into it personally. So to make people think that they don't find something wrong about lesbianism, But there was no original implication of something has been wrong about it in the first place. But rather the implication is that she could be mistaken for a male.
You are fake news.
This idea also goes at odds to when she gets
I feel like this is getting a bit in the weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Like,
I think
like
he's spending a bit too much time on this. I feel.
My problem with the Dragon Maid argument is that like he's conflating like sexual preferences with morality, because like some people don't do it because of morality, and some people don't do it because they're not into it.
That's not even. Yeah, it's not even. Like the problem here is that he's trying to make the point that this is evidence that he's presenting right here. Like this is his example of so they changed the dubs for insert leftist agenda here, right? The issue is this example's taking way too long to get through, and you could have probably done this in a way faster time. You didn't need to spend as much time on this as he is.
And he has subs in almost all of his clips.
Bad boy.
That's an aesthetic thing that we kind of lost that battle, unfortunately.
I'm fucking bad boy. Bad.
I mean, he can download the raws.
I do
or the
find
dub.
it. I do find it interesting though. This is off topic because this section is off topic, right? I'd never seen these tweets from Monica Rial before about her trying to explain this Kobayashi shit, right? And it's interesting the excuse that she uses of being like, oh well, we didn't want to show so there was anything wrong with lesbianism, which is I know it is correct. There was never any like actual implication that Kobayashi had a problem with lesbianism. It was more kind of like a questioning. It was kind of like, but I'm a woman though. What? Like it was questioning it rather than kind of just being an outright refusal. Whereas, funnily enough, in the actual dub, it is an outright refusal. She goes, no, I'm not into women. You know, it completely changes the dynamic. So, yeah. But anyway, let's just see if we can just blaze through this.
drunk. She lets out what she holds back, and how she either wants to see Toru in a maid outfit, because she's really into maids, or wants to see Toru naked. Making the "I'm not into chicks" is a complete lie. It also makes the whole show with a very weird undertone on how Toru is a lesbian, always trying to make advances on their straight friend with the hopes of turning them into a lesbian. Although, let's take a look at one of their tweets in this situation. Characters in stories have to start at A before they can get to Z.
Well, no shit.
Yeah, just great. Let's have a show that teaches us that sexuality is a choice
this
and
goes
a
on a little bit too
Hey
long.
guys, if you were ever oppressed for your sexuality, Marchie's changes in this anime is the perfect solution for you. Just choose to be a different sexuality.
Just choose to be gay. Oh god. Okay, I do like this joke, but at the same time, you're right. It's going on a bit long.
It's a bit overused.
No, I don't think it's an overused joke. I just think he spent, like I said, he's spending too much time on this. He should have just been like, okay, here's the basic gist of the change. Here's why it's wrong. Let's move on, right? Like, because he's trying to give evidence and examples to back up his perspective that the change. The cancellation was due to political reasons, right? And these are the examples he's using as justification for that. He should have just been like, bam, 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 bam. Here you go. Here's your examples. So yeah, he spent a little bit too much time on this, but let's keep going.
It's that simple. Or maybe Jamie wants to remove lesbian representation from the media. But yeah, on a more serious note, not only is this not in line with the original source, or the character, it's a change to not make it seem bad for them, which this could be seen as normalization. As the more you see it, the more normalized it becomes, and thus it happens.
This is...
Just keep going, because I actually want to see where this argument's going, because I'm wondering what the hell this has to do with.
Alright. Yeah.
Okay, real talk. At this point, during videos like this, when they get into the weeds, I tend to times 2 through most of it.
Alright, but let's just try and blaze through it. So, yeah.
And the other changes talking about patriarchy, Gamergate people hating on women, and totally wasn't about anything else, and Hajime no Gal with out-of-place simping and weird patriarchal lines. Bofuri lines changed from a light sexual joke to not even a sexual joke at all. But they would still have sexual jokes. Yeah, there would be a massive shit show if they just did that to every show all at once. Don't let a single one slide. I may have a reason to believe they actually do believe in normalization.
Can you pause real quick?
I'm just waiting for when it comes.
Because this is not about the cancellation of interspecies reviewers.
He's gone way into the weeds.
Yeah, this actually seems like a completely different topic, because I understand where he's coming from. The idea that you can in some way kind of train your audience to accept things like script changes or source material changes.
It's boiling frog.
Yeah, but I don't see how that has to do at this point with.
I'm not seeing the correlation between this and the business decision that
this seems like two separate issues that are both valid, but I don't see the connection.
Yeah, again, he's trying to use this as his examples, right? But then he's now going into this whole normalization argument. Oh, they're trying to normalize this, and the next thing. And again, it feels like this could have been its own video. Like he's kind of drifted into this other thing. Again, it should have just been, okay, here's the examples, and here's why they back up what I'm trying to say, rather than I'm going to spend a bunch of time on Kobayashi and explaining that controversy, and now I'm going to pump out a few more examples, and now I'm going to talk about normalization and why I think that they're trying to normalize such and such and such and such, right? Yeah, let's keep going.
Who has done this, and in fact, other dubbing companies, in my opinion, have done it even more egregiously. You can look at this and ask, yeah, but why do all these small changes matter? Well, in the case of Dragon Maid, it fundamentally changes the character. And now let's get into what a job of a dub is. Under a capitalist lens, what a dub does is sell products to viewers that normally wouldn't get it, which is usually a super ridiculous
of capitalism.
Well, man, we had the Marxist fucking lens, and now we got the capitalist lens. We got the whole speech.
I'm glad I'm finally represented in these videos.
Yeah.
I'm
finally
so tired of this commie, I can't afford rent and 5 streaming services bullshit.
Alright. So, okay, let's let him explain, and then we'll talk about it after.
Reductionist way of thinking about it, and I've never heard anyone describe it as such. But at the same time, no one would also deny it. When you ask what a dub does, the idea is you change the language to suit an English-speaking audience. You would want people who would like to experience the art in their own language. And here's a huge conflict of interest. It isn't just changing the language, it's fundamentally changing the characters and in some cases, the stories. I used to watch anime both subbed and dubbed, and would see these changes, although my intent of watching was to see which one's better. Not via the changes, but via the voice acting and the performance. But I don't really see much of a reason to do that for all anime anymore. For a very simple reason. Now, I understand this doesn't work for everyone, but it does apply to me. Why would I watch most dubs? Sure, I will still find a few that I think would have been done well, but seriously, after seeing nearly 800 to 900 different anime, and over half of them I have watched both subbed and dubbed, I could say to me at most there was like 40-ish dubs that were better than the subs, and the rest either really bad or just serviceable. I used to be a bit interested in how the characters were different, but the longer that change goes on, it seems more like a contradiction in the character with a lot of shows rather than a difference in a character. Like bloody hell, even Shield Hero's dub was changed to make Raphtalia into a moron. Although that will be explained in a later video that I'm scripting. I now pretty much reserve watching the dubs of a show only for shows that I really like, which now just makes the dub changes stick out that much more. Which actually gets into the more ironic part about this situation, as the dub of Interspecies Reviewers looked really fucking good. The first episode of this dub could easily say the dub was going to be better than the sub, besides Krim's voice. But now we'll never see that come into fruition. Although, long story short, why do we care about these changes? It's a fundamental change to a character which can turn to be a contradiction later, when there's no reason to change the characters themselves. Why are these small changes important? Well, why make these small changes to begin with? You can bring up the argument that they have to change some words to match the lip flap.
So, I mean, I said this before, but how does this relate to interspecies
He was
reviewers?
relating it back to interspecies reviewers talking about the dub, and then now he's kind of gone back to talking just about yeah, again, it's like he hasn't kind of brought it back around yet. Maybe he's going to do that in a minute. So let's keep going and see if he does, and if he doesn't, we'll critique it.
And then I can bring up examples where this doesn't work. Because when they were talking, they weren't on screen, or they could have actually changed the words to keep the same message but completely changed it. To Loveru could have easily been translated to Get With The Times. And there's a few other translations they could have did. But Shield Hero has no excuse at all, as their lines changes happened when the character was off screen, aka no lip flaps to match. And it was still changed to not make any goddamn sense in the context of the situation. There is no real reason to make these specific changes from a translation perspective, aside from trying to push an agenda. I would say this is an abundance of evidence for it, but definitely not all. And if you don't believe it after this, putting more evidence down there is not going to convince you.
Another explanation could possibly be...
Alright, pause. That was the argument for the cancellation of interspecies reviewers?
Yeah, I think he was trying to be like, okay, here's all of this evidence as to why I think it's agenda-driven. And it's like, again,
I could
didn't
see,
need to spend his...
I could see the
it.
script. I could see the script changes in the other episode, in like Maid Dragon and Hajime no Gao and Prison School. I can see those definitely. I would definitely consider those agenda driven because, you know, mentioning Gamergate and fucking Prison School makes no
patriarchy.
Yeah, makes no fucking sense. Mentioning the patriarchy makes no fucking sense in some of the parts. You know, changing dialogue to make it like clear that characters aren't, you know, anti-lesbian or something for some reason. I could say that's agenda driven. He hasn't made those are all script changes. Those won't have anything to do.
He hasn't.
With...
He hasn't like connected the dots.
Yeah, there's
a
a clear logical bridge that hasn't been hasn't been.
And the thing is that you can like make that logical bridge, right? Like you can go, look, here are these examples. Clearly, Funimation, at least on the lower levels, is very agenda-driven. We can assume the possibility that the higher brass could also be agenda-driven, and then that can lead us to think that maybe that episode 3 caused a bit of a stir internally. Perhaps some of the other employees made a stir about it outside of some of the other people working on the dub, because we don't know. We only have the testimony of one person who worked on the dub, right? From that Reddit post you mentioned, right? Could have been that other people felt differently. And that caused them to try to axe it, right?
Also,
you can. The thing is, right? The problem with this right now is that you can make that argument. The problem is he hasn't made that argument. He's just sort of been like, okay, here's a shitload of evidence, but he hasn't like tied that in together.
Beyond that, though, concluding the cancellation of this as being agenda-driven, if I'm going to assume that when he says agenda-driven, he means left-leaning agenda, right? Because all of the changes so far would be in line with what people would consider that. Now, here's the thing. I'm not sure if any of you ever saw it, because I was actually really curious to see what their coverage was like, because they tend to be a bit more left-leaning, but, Animation News Network's coverage of interspecies reviewers was incredibly positive. They saw it as a positive portrayal of what they consider legitimate sex work, and they had no big issues with it. They thought it was fair, and even after it was canceled streaming or for international streaming by Funimation, they still covered it. So I don't think that this is a internal agenda. I think that this is probably some... this is the problem with their entire response. Their entire response has led to this speculation.
Yeah,
I think it's a mix of things. I don't think the agenda is the main cause, but I think it's a factor in it.
I don't think it's a factor.
I don't think it's. You see,
And if
that's
I
the thing I
can-
mentioned before. At the start, everyone immediately jumped to it being the agenda, right?
Yeah.
However, I don't think. I think after more stuff had come out, and I think after we'd kind of thought about it a bit more, I actually agree, I agree with Lolly. I don't think it was agenda driven. I think it was.
I think it was a corporate. I think
Spoiler.
it was a corporate decision.
No, I'm gonna spoil it. I'm not gonna say it. But
Well, if I can complain just a tiny little bit more, he says, "I have gathered all this evidence, and if you still don't agree with me, then you're close-minded." Basically,
Yeah.
what he said.
Well, he more said that nothing.
My
I put
issue
out going
is-
to convince you. I don't necessarily view that as a statement of saying, "Oh, you're close-minded." I see it more as I can't really convince you at this point.
Yeah, my take is a little bit more meaner then, but my issue is that his evidence is all the same. I don't see it really as different pieces of evidence. It's just one big
Yeah.
thing. Like if you have a victim on the street, he's shot, and then you go into somebody's house and you find a gun, and a shotgun, and a sniper rifle, and a submachine gun, and a Uzi. That's not evidence that he shot him,
yeah, the problem.
the guy on the street. It just means he has lots of guns, not all those. Every change in the script is not a
Again,
new
the
piece of evidence in this case for me.
The problem comes back down to the fact that he hasn't tied it all together properly.
I think he tried to tie that in with the whole normalization.
He tried
thing.
it.
And
Yeah,
I think I think those are two separate issues. I can see his argument for normalization for script and dub changes, as I do actually think that on some level there has been kind of an industry-wide push for changing content as it comes out, but I don't quite think that was the case here with interspecies reviewers being canceled. Let me finish real quick because
sorry.
I honest to God think, because these are how these companies are just kind of run sometimes, I honest to God think that somebody higher up who has a bit more of a stick up their ass, who might be older, or who might have kind of outdated ideas as to, what is and isn't acceptable for streaming services, probably looked at this, saw it, and was like, oh my god, we're streaming porn. And immediately
read the
shut
description
everything the fuck down.
Well, you have to. What is it? Occam's razor, the simplest, explanation, right?
Don't attribute malice to what can be attributed to stupidity. Yeah.
And that too. Yeah, exactly. But so now he's going to get into Sony. So let's hear what he has. You had a.
Well, I got one other point where he says if I've all this evidence, I personally disagree that it is it's all one big evidence instead of different pieces of evidence. But he says, and if this doesn't change your mind, then I don't think I can say anything more that will change your mind. This is the case.
Right.
This is what all the evidence points to. And now he says, and there's another thing that may have could have caused it. So I don't know how long it was, like 5 minutes or so, constructing this big argument for why this is the reason it was agenda driven. And now he says, maybe it was Sony.
Yeah, he's gone. Oh, well, yeah, maybe it was Sony. So, yeah, let's keep going.
With Sony owning Funimation and how Sony censors.
Also, I noticed that his mic quality has changed. So I don't know if this is like maybe he put this in after. So that could explain what you're talking about, where he like made this definitive argument, and now he's like he probably thought, oh, but what about the Sony thing? I should probably add that in as well, and he's gone back and put that in. Have to ask him, but that kind of like there's the impression I'm getting from the fact that his mic quality has shifted a little bit here.
Yeah, but I still find it odd. Again, he made a big, definite statement on why this is the reason. And then right after he said this is the reason, he's coming with an alternative.
It is a bit weird. But let's continue.
So much of its own work that these standards aren't actually Funimation standards, they're actually Sony standards, which I don't know how likely this explanation could be, but I guess it's a little plausible.
Although, there is one more very likely explanation. One that is so likely, everyone overthinks
another
Funimation's
one.
intentions and making them out onto a 5D chess level of intelligence. Here we go. Funimation is incompetent and doesn't know what it's doing, and incompetence shouldn't be rewarded.
I'm kind of retarded.
But yeah, you...
So I love that
That's
fucking-
where I'm standing right now. That's
that's basically my position. I love that clip with Alex Jones, by the way. It's fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. It's a beast. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Is that I think it's just Funimation's fucking incompetent. Right? I think they were incompetent. They were incompetent with the statement that they made. They were incompetent with how they handled the entire situation. They were incompetent with pretty much the whole thing, right? And I think that just is what it comes down to. It's just fucking stupid.
Yeah, because I can't see the Sony argument as being valid, because Sony owns Aniplex and they have, they
have all kinds of shit. Yeah,
I know that they have like heavy connections with Madman Entertainment, because they're planning to roll that under Aniplex and.
Oh fuck, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, and if it was a decision at Sony entirely, it would have actually have canceled things for both for Anime Lab, and probably would have canceled the run altogether, considering that Aniplex is on the production committee for things like that, right?
Yeah.
Like they would have just cut their funding altogether, and that would have actually put the broadcast in jeopardy.
Yeah, probably. So yeah, I think that that's my kind of stance, is that I think it's just pure incompetence. And I do agree that incompetence should not be rewarded, which is why people need to stop giving money to Funimation. Stop it. Stop buying their shit.
Clap.
Just fucking stop.
Just go
Yeah,
buy
'cause
things from
listen, they're like-
okay, look. Every time you want to buy something for Funimation, take a step back, go on the DL site, find the game you like, and pay them money. It'll make so much of a difference in the long run.
Go find some niche ass fucking porn game or some niche ass dojin game and just fucking go. Just
fuck.
Give
listen,
that money,
Funimation are like seagulls. Like if you don't feed them, they
go
will
on
leave.
to Just USA and pick up the latest fucking virtual novel hit or whatever, right, for $50 or something.
I accidentally left the watch together. I'm coming back in.
Well, I think he's pretty much it's getting. I think he's at the end anyway.
Yeah, we're just wrapping up.
Yeah, it's Patreon stuff here after this.
All right, I'll just let it run. I'll let it run for a little bit, and then we'll see.
You can write this off as a conspiracy theory. Funimation never put out a statement on exactly why it was gotten rid of, besides that it didn't meet their standards. And I would say I have a fuck ton more reasons to back mine up, while the "it's too sexual for the app" argument doesn't even hold water. But I suppose that's just another assumption. And as always, I bid you adieu.
Damn.
Thanks for watching. Fan art.
Now it's Patreon.
That's about 9. It's about 20 uses of the word assumption in the video.
We're gonna have one hell of a drinking game.
Alright, so, conclusions. I think that, although I agree with a lot of the points made in the video, I do think that the construction of the video needed some work. I think that he could have done from, condensing a lot of stuff. Definitely didn't need to talk about the Kobayashi stuff for that long, or those examples for that long. Definitely didn't need to go into the whole diatribe about assumptions and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I feel like this could have gone from an 18-minute video to probably a 10-minute video, I reckon.
And some more smoothing in, and this, like I said before, this is the reason, and then there's this reason,
Yeah,
and
there's a
then
few
there's
things
this
like
reason.
that popped up that could have,
And I mean, we're definitely guilty of sites tracking,
This isn't
going into
scripted.
weeds and
Well, this
wildernesses
isn't
and off
scripted,
Slamming
cliffs.
to each other.
Yeah, we have more of an excuse, but if you come with me for this is the conclusion and I'm going to explain why, I don't need to hear about how it's about normalization unless you have a very good reason to. I don't need to hear about normalization and MEL scores, how they're going to change their systems, and so all stuff that is not related to.
I think he's
to
got like
the thing.
the jigsaw pieces, but he just hasn't put the puzzle together. Like he's got the makings of a good video here, but he hasn't like tied it all together properly in a cohesive kind of way. It's
Yeah,
just
like,
it's
video-
sort of it's sort of like separate elements, right? Some of which of those elements could have probably have been their own videos, like he kind of alluded to, right? Like the whole normalization stuff, that could be its own topic completely, right? I feel like he's got the individual elements, but those elements haven't been cooked into a meal properly.
Yeah. And that's just kind of the thing. Like you can have two separate problems, like, cause it is a large enough company that you can have two separate problems manifesting itself. One being the subtle shift of script changes over time to meet an agenda, and just raw incompetence. Those can exist separately within the same company. They aren't necessarily tied together. And I genuinely don't think they are in this case. I don't think that there was an agenda reason behind the cancellation. Well, I say cancellation, the pulling.
Well, it was cancellation on their service, not cancellation.
It was more like they were pulling streaming. I would say would be more appropriate, because canceled implies that it is unilaterally was just pulled.
Canceled,
yeah, which wasn't the case at all. In this case, it was more that it was pulled from their streaming services, and I don't think he made a compelling enough argument for that being agenda driven. Like all you can really say is, oh yeah, their scripting and dubbing department is kind of shitty.
Right. All right. Well, I guess that kind of caps it off.
I just want to add that I don't think this is like a bad video, but it's definitely like rougher on the edges. There's some stuff that he could there's just some stuff that he could just shown on screen as like a quick put it on screen and then expand upon it in the comments.
Yeah, again, it's like I agree with some of the individual elements on their own, but tied together, it doesn't quite hit the home run, right?
Yeah.
Well, to summarize, I would give this video then a 5, which is just a failing grade, unfortunately. just a little too many of those problems to make it a good coherent
I think
video.
The thing with the script altogether is that a lot of it's things that can be jumped off of and made into their own topics, but don't really tie together too well. I would actually like to see a video on the normalization topic.
I agree too. I think that would be a really good kind of thing to cover, especially because normalization theory can fuck right.
Well, more of that, I think he does have at least somewhat of an interesting observation that can you train a consumer base to accepting small changes over time, and that leading to bigger changes down the line, right?
I mean, it's the frog in the slowly boiling water analogy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll call it here then. This has been Critical Critique Pulls on Point, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.